Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We'll be here tonight on October 11th and again on the 13th, if you miss it tonight, to talk about our fellowship programs here at the UNC Eshelman School of Pharmacy. And tomorrow night, Wednesday, the 12th, we'll be here to talk about our graduate programs. So you're welcome to join us for any of those 3 nights. I understand that we have a little over 400 people who've registered to be with us for these programs, and welcome to UNC. My name is Joellen Rogers, and I'm the Associate Director of the Fellowship Program, and the Director of the program, Bob Dupuy, will be with you on Thursday night, and then our Director of our Graduate Program will be with you tomorrow night, Dr. Danny Gonzalez. So, an overview of how we're going to spend our time together. I will spend a little while going over the broad strokes of the program, and then we will have each of our individual fellows from each of our programs come and give you more specifics about their training program, and then we'll leave a good portion, the latter half of the program, for Q&A, and you're welcome to submit questions, and we'll be gladly receiving those in the coming hour. So again, we'll have some introductory remarks by myself. I'll rely on the fellows to talk about the specific structure of their individual programs, and I will close with a brief review of the application process, and then again, a good portion for Q&A. So, of course, this is myself, Joellen Rogers, and the director of the program, Dr. Bob Dupuy, and Dr. Dupuy will be here with you on Thursday night. I will say the program on Thursday night is going to be very similar in content. We'll flop and have some different fellows coming in, but representing the same program and delivering some similar content, but we're offering it twice if you couldn't make it tonight. And if you forget something and you want to come back on Thursday night and ask a different question or a new question, you're welcome to do so. So the UNC Eshelman School of Pharmacy is nationally known and now starting to have a global presence as well in 3 key areas, and that would be clinical practice, as well as education and research. We are currently ranked #1 in the U.S. News and World Report. That's a recent ranking. We were #2 for several years, and we are very proud of this new ranking. Our fellowship program has been in existence now for 35 years, with GlaxoSmithKline being our longest standing partner and a continued partner. But as you will see tonight, we've added several additional partners over the last 35 years. So I'll briefly mention our academic fellowship, and we do have an academic fellow with us tonight. And you can see that we have them in a variety of areas, including heart failure, cardiovascular pharmacotherapy, HIV, pharmacology, as well as infectious disease, and oncology. And then finally, we have a T32 clinical pharmacology program that's funded by the NIH. These are our industry-sponsored fellowships, and you can see that we have several partners, including GlaxoSmithKline, 2 large clinical research organizations, PPD and Quintiles, as well as United Therapeutics, Nuventra. And our fellowship programs are categorized as clinical research and drug development, as well as pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, as well as pharmacometrics. And there's a little bit of overlap between those fellowships, as you would expect. Global regulatory affairs, medical affairs, and then finally pharmaceutical outcomes. Tonight, of our drug development fellows, we'll have Natalie Pierce from United Therapeutics introducing you to the concept of clinical research drug development fellowship programs. In regulatory affairs, we have Brittany Dussman, and she's representing GlaxoSmithKline tonight. For medical affairs, Prani Paka will be with us tonight, and our health outcomes fellow, Tyler Risch, will be with us as well. And then finally, representing PK/PD and pharmacometrics, we have Stephen Green, representing Nuventra specifically. And I failed to mention that Tyler is representing health outcomes specifically with GSK. Our academic fellow, Erica, is here, and she's our heart failure pharmacotherapy fellow. And I'll just comment of the slides I just mentioned, we'll have new faces on Thursday night, with the exception of Tyler. He's gonna take one for the team and come back 2 nights in a row. So all of our fellowship programs, whether they be academic or industry sponsored, are 2-year training programs. And the first year for the industry-sponsored fellowships are here at UNC for the most part. There's one exception to that, and that is with regulatory affairs. And I'm going to let Dr. Dustman go into detail on that in a little while. And then the second year for industry-sponsored fellowships are with the industry sponsor. Now, academic fellowships, being that the individual is interested in pursuing a career in academia, do spend 2 years here focused on teaching and research at the school. So all of first-year fellows are involved with coursework, and we'll show you some of the coursework opportunities. They do obviously vary depending on your area of interest and your fellowship focus. The primary focus and the one reason the companies want the fellows to spend the first year of the fellowship here at UNC is so they can gain hands-on experience in the trenches, helping conduct clinical research, translational research, and then, of course, regulatory processes. So when they go to the company, they have a better understanding of the workings of these projects from the ground up. We do have a weekly seminar that involves all of our graduate and fellows, and our graduate students and fellows will present in that seminar. In addition, we have guest speakers come. Our most recent guest speaker was from the FDA, but we also have faculty, our own faculty often speak in that seminar as well. And then actually what I think is the highlight of the program is our monthly Fellows Forum, and this is primarily industry focused, but our academic fellows often choose to participate in that as well. And we basically have our industry sponsors come out, individuals from the sponsor companies come to the school and spend time with the fellows, focusing on various topics that cover all aspects of drug development. I will say that we do actually reach out to some non-sponsors, so we have other companies in the Research Triangle Park who may be involved in speaking, but lots of the speakers are fellows, some of them fellows that finished the program 20, 25 years ago, or been involved and engaged with the fellowship since its inception 35 years ago. Finally, I'll say that we do have an opportunity to complete or participate in our teaching certificate program here at the School of Pharmacy, and many of our fellows are engaged in that. But certainly there are many opportunities to get involved with our professional students who are interested in careers in industry, and that's a great opportunity to mentor those future professionals who will follow in your footsteps. Again, the second year for the industry-sponsored fellowships are with the sponsor company, and I'll let the fellows, each of the fellows talk about that a little bit more. I think all of the fellows, as they touch and get involved with these various hands-on experiences in research and regulatory projects, will have opportunities for presentation. And this says national professional meetings, but I would expand that to even global meetings now. Those could be poster or platform presentations, as well as opportunities for publication. And I will just say that the appointment starts July 1, and it's a 2-year program and ends at the end of June of the second year. There is an opportunity to gain some additional experience at the FDA. This is usually a very brief experience. It is probably not an opportunity open to all fellows, but it is an opportunity that every year I would say about 2 or 3 fellows voice an interest in. The fellows typically spend about 2 to 3 months at the FDA gaining experience primarily with the clinical pharmacology group, or some aspect of the clinical pharmacology group, and some of that depends on whether their interest is in regulatory affairs or more drug development, and then, of course, PK/PD. But you can see here from the bullets that there's a variety of opportunities they gain experience in. I think one of the greatest opportunities is getting exposure to reviewing meetings involving regulatory submissions, as well as just an opportunity to kind of network with the various employees within the FDA. A little bit more information about the coursework. So you can see there's a wide variety of topics here, and you can imagine that if you were interested in a career in regulatory affairs, and you would probably want to be participating in the regulatory affairs certificate course. You know, that's a course that includes anything from U.S. to Canadian to European regulations. most all of our fellows, there are very few who do not get involved in the clinical trial design course. Obviously, the PK/PD fellows are a little more interested in that course, as well as modeling and simulations. However, that's not closed off to drug development fellows if they want to opt to take that elective as well. And then there's additional opportunities for rotations, elective coursework in metabolism, genomics, and certainly important skills like leadership and even public speaking. So a lot of it is basically trying to tailor the electives and the coursework based on your personal interest in your career direction. The Fellows Forum, as I mentioned earlier, is focusing on some of the latest topics in drug development and how we get the drug from early first-in-man studies and other preclinical studies all the way to phase 4, and the entire process you'll be exposed to, including regulatory requirements. But I think what's important is we learn from leaders and from all of our industry partners, and sometimes they even partner up for some of these presentations, and that makes them pretty dynamic and very interesting. And then finally, I mentioned our weekly fellows and graduate student seminar. So I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Erica Giblin, and she is our academic fellow in heart failure pharmacotherapy.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rogers. As she mentioned, my name is Erica, and I'm currently completing my first year of the Heart Failure Academic Fellowship. Within the academic fellowships, there are various specialties that you can look at. So there's heart failure and then cardiovascular diseases, as well as HIV, pharmacology, and infectious diseases, as well as oncology. And as mentioned, if you decide to do an academic fellowship, you'll spend both of your years at UNC, and you'll be guided by a mentor in the department here, and they'll be in your area of interest, depending on which fellowship you decide to do. There are multiple research opportunities as an academic fellow, everything ranging from developing the hypotheses or just starting the design for an in vitro project, all the way through to serving as a study coordinator for clinical trials. And most of these clinical trials and other projects are part of a collaboration with different departments here at UNC. So you get a multitude of experience and you get to meet various people with these fellowships and with the research opportunities. Not to mention, of course, as you might expect with this academic fellowship, there's a lot of teaching opportunities. You can start with the small or large group discussion sessions, and those are usually with the students of the PharmD curriculum. You can also have experiences with the didactic lectures with these students, and then as well you can complete the UNC resident teaching certificate. So as an academic fellow, you can certainly do that, and since you have 2 years here at UNC, you can do that either year. There's also clinical opportunities. Most of the academic fellowships do require you to have a residency background because you do have the ability to serve as a clinical pharmacist at some of the specialty clinics here at UNC. And then, like Dr. Rogers said, you can also have a chance to present your findings from the research in a multitude of different areas, and then as well as being able to gain experience with publishing articles, writing grants, and things like that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Natalie Pierce, and she'll be talking to you about the Drug Development Fellowship.
Hi everyone, like she mentioned, my name is Natalie, and I am a first-year clinical research and drug development fellow. I am working specifically with United Therapeutics, but there are multiple other sponsors. For drug development, PPD and United Therapeutics sponsor a drug development fellow. And then for medical affairs, the first year is the same for this program, and GSK and United Therapeutics accept a medical affairs fellow. So the first year at UNC is the same for the clinical research and drug development fellows as well as the medical affairs fellows. And the goal is really to learn about designing, initiating, and conducting research, as well as presenting and publishing study findings. So during this time, we're going to learn about and participate in phase 1 through phase 4 trials, as well as protocol development, and then assisting with grant submissions and IRB submissions. Additionally, through the classes, we learn about biostatistical analysis and how to analyze data. Additionally, one of our major roles is through study coordination, and that will vary depending on who your faculty mentor is, what your different projects are. And similar to the other programs, there are opportunities for publications and presentations, and then we also participate in the coursework as well. So the second year for the Clinical Research and Drug Development Fellow is all at the company that your sponsor company. And so during that time, you're learning about the industry side of drug development, learning about global product and clinical development. Often you are working on a specific team, although your company is often very flexible in allowing you to help develop the goals that you want to for your fellowship year. So we learn about project management, and there's opportunities to explore different areas in industry such as pharmacovigilance, participate in medical writing, as well as strategic development and feasibility. Throughout this time, your company is generally pretty receptive to your goals for the fellowship as well, and helping you select which projects you want to work on. So now I will welcome Dr. Prani Paka to talk about medical affairs.
Hello, everyone. My name is Prani Paka. I'm a first-year medical affairs fellow here at UNC, and my affiliate company is GlaxoSmithKline. I'll be focusing more on medical affairs today. So medical affairs is a very broad term. It incorporates many different components and many different responsibilities. So I'll kind of briefly touch on what all the different aspects that encompass a huge medical affairs term. So some of the things you're looking at is medical field teams, post-launch clinical trial teams, medical information services, medical strategy, and medical communications. And for as far as your role goes, I'm going to focus more on the second year since Natalie kind of already talked about the first year. Our first year is pretty similar to drug development. For a second year, you'll basically be assigned a therapeutic area. Either you'll be assigned or sometimes you do have an option to choose on which therapeutic area you want to work in. It really depends on what the company's need is at the time. And you also have opportunities to collaborate across cross-functional teams to support overall medical strategy. So this is really important because medical affairs, a key role is to kind of work with various teams such as drug development, commercial teams, regulatory, to make sure that you guys are all aligned with the same medical strategy and it follows the company's ultimate mission. Also, you're involved in launching preparations for new medications. So for instance, drug development is, for the most part, they're involved in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials to kind of get a drug approved by the FDA. But medical affairs is like kind of post-launch. They kind of prepare if they want to extend the label for a drug or if they have any other investigator-initiated studies. Medical affairs is kind of responsible for that. Also, you do work with commercial, as I mentioned, in competitive intelligence and market analyses projects. So as a first year, I'm currently working on a competitive intelligence project with GSK. So it mostly just depends on if there's a need at the time or if there's a project, but it might vary based on, once again, what time you come in and what projects are available. And one key role also for medical affairs fellows is to review all promotional materials. So everything you present to external stakeholders or internal stakeholders has to be reviewed by medical committees to make sure the accuracy is correct. Is accurate, and also that it's backed by proper clinical evidence before you make a medical claim. And also you're kind of interacting with external experts on a constant basis. So I know a lot of you are interested in MSL roles. So this is kind of what your role is going to be, establishing and maintaining those relationships with external experts such as KOLs or other healthcare professionals. And also understanding laws and regulations and policies required to ensure appropriate interactions. So as due to a lot of anti-kickback laws within the pharmaceutical industries, there's a fine line between how to interact with healthcare professionals nowadays. So medical affairs teams are responsible for training all medical affairs employees on how to properly interact with healthcare professionals. And finally, as I mentioned, you do work with regulatory as well to kind of prepare all appropriate regulatory documents and also label updates related to that particular drug. With that being said, I'm going to transfer it over to Brittany Dussman. She's going to be speaking on global regulatory affairs.
All right, my name is Brittany Dussman, and I am one of 2 first-year Global Regulatory Affairs Fellows with GlaxoSmithKline. And just a quick overview of what regulatory affairs is for people who might not be familiar. As a regulatory affairs professional, you're the face of the company to regulatory authorities such as the FDA in the US or the EMA in Europe, the EU. So you're in charge of meeting with health authorities, of answering any questions they might have about your submissions, and just making sure that the overall drug development process, from preclinical trials all the way up to post-marketing even, is progressing appropriately, and that everything is going as planned, and that you're generating data that will ultimately allow your medication to be approved. And you also work with all different therapeutic or all different functional areas within pharmaceutical companies. So you're working with everybody to make sure that the drug development process is progressing appropriately. So like Dr. Rogers had alluded to earlier, our structure is a little different from other fellowships in this program. So for the first 6 months, we are at UNC. So half of the week you spend your time at UNC, and then the other half you're at GSK. So your time at UNC is spent in the Office of Regulatory Affairs working with clinical trials that are done here at UNC. For example, we are currently working with the Institute of Global Health and Infectious Disease. So we're in charge of making sure that protocols are followed on the sites that UNC oversees. We make sure that informed consent is being documented, that all of the studies have IRB approval, and that all of the safety information that needs to be reported to the IRB that's being done. So it's regulatory affairs, but instead of from an industry perspective, you're seeing it from a site perspective. So that's an important, something important that a regulatory affairs professional should have. And of course, we do have UNC coursework. So specifically, we have workshops on US and EU regulations. And like Dr. Rogers had mentioned, there's the Regulatory Affairs Certification, or RAC exam. A lot of regulatory affairs professionals choose to get this certification. So it's kind of unique that this program allows you to take courses to help to prepare you for this exam. And then you actually are able to take the exam in the fellowship program. So that's kind of unique to this program. We also take classes on drug development. Like I said, regulatory affairs is very involved in drug development, so that is important for somebody to understand while they're in regulatory affairs. We also have classes on specific regulatory submissions, and then leadership skills, which are, of course, important for anybody working in industry. Leadership is always important to have. And then the last 18 months are spent at GSK. And it's important that I mention here that for 6 months, you're working here at UNC Chapel Hill, and then GSK at RTP. And then for the last 18 months, you will actually be relocated up to Pennsylvania. It's the GSK site right outside of Philadelphia. And this is where most of the regulatory affairs department of GSK is located. So that's the reason for the relocation. So you will be working full-time at GSK for these 18 months, but you still do have opportunity for UNC coursework remotely if that's something that you're interested in. So your specific experience while you're at GSK is obviously going to vary based on what's going on in the company, but just some experiences that we've been able to have. You will be involved with strategic interactions with the regulatory agencies. So you're going to help to prepare for meetings, make sure that the briefing documents are appropriately set up so that the agencies know what you want to talk about at your meetings, and that you're answering questions that might come up from these health authorities. Most of the fellows will be placed in a specific therapeutic group, so you'll be supporting projects from a specific therapeutic area. But you will be able to work outside of that specific therapeutic group if a very good learning opportunity comes up somewhere else. So there's a lot of flexibility, even though you are placed in a specific therapeutic area. Most fellows will also have the opportunity to work a little bit with regulatory intelligence, which is kind of looking at the competitive landscape, seeing what other companies are doing in terms of regulations and regulatory strategies, how other companies are getting drugs approved, and then we can see if anything is relevant to products that we're supporting. So that's a very interesting topic. And then we also have opportunities to contribute to and learn more about drug advertising and labeling. So that's something that just kind of helps you to be a more rounded regulatory affairs professional after the fellowship. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stephen Green to talk about pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics.
Hi, my name is Stephen Green, as Dr. Brittany Dustman has just mentioned. I am one of the pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic, and sort of pharmacometric fellows. And before I sort of get into the nuts and bolts of my fellowship, I just wanted to sort of tell you why I chose this program and what kind of allured me to it. And mainly, one of the primary reasons is that this fellowship has really allowed me to sort of explore things that I'm very interested in that may not have been sort of written into the the wording of the description of the fellowship. And so I've been very appreciative of that, and that's something that you should really look forward to and look for in a fellowship program. So I'm sure you've all been through your PK, PD courses and your various coursework throughout your schooling. And so I'll just touch base on how that kind of applies to the research side of things. So as a PK, PD, and pharmacometrics fellow, similar to many of the other fellows, you spend the first year at UNC. You can help design and implement PK and PD studies. You do these in healthy volunteers or specific patient populations. In my specific case, I'm working both in the HIV space as well as in hepatic insufficiency space. You also, on the pharmacometric side, you simulate computer PK and PD models, and you use this with various simulation platforms like NonMem and Phoenix Win NonLin. And then you also get into some laboratory methods to evaluate clinical drug disposition problems. Also, you'll learn a lot of biostatistical analysis and, as I mentioned, pharmacometrics. And then your second year is spent at the sponsor company, and here you're just broadening what you've learned that first year. You're going to do some more pop PK PD analyses, learn about exposure response, sort of how to model disease progression, also do some clinical trial simulations and some first time in human proof of concept drug-drug interactions, food studies. I mean, there's a whole bunch of studies that you'll be involved in. And depending on the company that you're with, in my specific case, they've already given me projects to work on, and I've done projects in all these different types of spaces. So it's a very exciting space to be in. And I'll turn it back to, sorry. Yeah, so I'll turn it over to the health outcomes fellow.
My name is Tyler Reinsch. Okay, so yes, I'm the the Pharmaceutical Outcomes Fellow, which is in combination with GlaxoSmithKline. So in the first year of the fellowship, you're going to be spending the majority of time at UNC, but you're also going to be spending time at GSK. So you're going to spend 1 to 2 days a week at GSK, and that's not, you might not actually be like on site at GSK for 1 or 2 days a week, but typically you're spending about probably 30–40% of your time on GSK related projects, as well as the rest of your time is going to be on UNC type projects or coursework in the outcomes research related fields. You're going to be taking courses in biostatistics, pharmacoepidemiology, health economic modeling, courses like that, pharmaceutical policy, like it says there. But just it kind of depends on your interest in health economics and outcomes research and how you're going to apply that and which courses you're interested in at UNC or at the School of Public Health, which is one of the best schools of public health in the country. Also at GSK, you're going to be working on projects kind of depending on, or which is based off of your kind of your expertise, or not your really expertise, but what your background is so far in the field. So you might be working on dossier updates, budget impact models, or maybe just writing outcomes research papers, things of that nature. Then in the second year, it's going to flip. So instead of having 20 to 30% of your time at UNC, you're going to be spending the majority of your time at GlaxoSmithKline, kind of building on the projects you had been starting in the first year, as well as just kind of taking on more of a role. You're basically just trying to develop the skills where you would be able to run your own outcome studies by the second year and fully implement those by the time you finish the fellowship. Probably the biggest thing that drove me to this fellowship versus some of the other ones around the country was just this mixed model where you could spend some of your days at UNC and some of your days at GSK kind of working on real world projects, as well as still getting that underlying coursework in academia or the academic component of the fellowship is a lot of the fellowships are either 1 year at the academic institution and then the next year at the pharmaceutical company, but that kind of, as these type of projects take longer than just a year, that kind of forces you to kind of like drop projects in the middle of it, or and not be able to see things to completion or see things to getting published. So that's pretty much the biggest benefit of a fellowship like this, where you have multiple places, and I don't really know. And then the second year, I'm not there yet, only the first year, so I really can't say what goes on at that time. Yeah. Is this me still? No? Okay, go back.
Yeah. Fellows for taking time out of their busy schedules and certainly their personal lives on the East Coast, where between 8 and 9 o'clock at night. I want to thank them. I'm sure you much rather have heard from each of them individually than have heard me cover all those slides. Some hot topics, though, that I'm sure everybody wants to be addressed is that we do offer a very competitive stipend, and it is very competitive with other fellowships across the nation, and it does take into account cost of living on the East Coast. We do allow for coverage of relocation expenses, and importantly, we've already received a question across the question panel about, do I have to move for the second year for which specific fellowship? So currently we only have 2 fellowships in which you move, and that would be the GSK Regulatory Affairs Fellow, where you relocate. GSK is just housing their regulatory affairs department primarily, not all, but primarily in Philadelphia, and that's why you would relocate to Philadelphia, and there would be coverage for relocation both to North Carolina for the first portion and then again to Philadelphia. And similarly for our Quintiles PK Fellowship, you have relocation for both the initial move to North Carolina and then the second move is actually to Kansas City. So, and I think that's important. Those are the only 2 fellowships, and we don't anticipate that changing in the coming year. We also are offered health insurance in our standard UNC benefits package, which I think is very nice, as well as support for professional travel and career development. So if you want to buy a textbook or participate in a course online, we can cover that kind of registration. But certainly if you're presenting at a national meeting or just want to attend a national or even potentially a global meeting for your professional development, that we would support that as well. So regarding recruitment, one of our biggest venues for recruitment is the ASHP mid-year, and I think that's true for many of the fellowship programs across the nation. ASHP this year is occurring over December 4th through the 8th, and that is in Las Vegas. You do register for the opportunity to interview through their personal placement service, and so you register for that, and then you go through that portal to request an interview. Attendance is encouraged because that gives us an opportunity to meet you, and us is anybody from the director of the program, Dr. Dupuy, and myself. We will have several of our corporate sponsors there, and they will be interested in meeting with you one-on-one, and we will also have some fellows there who you can ask questions of. And I think that's an important opportunity for us to start to get an idea of who our industry sponsors want to bring on site for interviews in early January. Attendance, again, to the meeting is not required, but is highly encouraged. You can go to our website, pharmacyfellowships.web.unc.edu, for instructions on the application process. That opens on Friday, October 15th, at the end of the week. The deadline for early consideration is November 15th, and it certainly helps for us to have those materials available when we're starting to receive requests through the ASHP portal for an interview. But the final deadline is January 1st, but I'd like to encourage you. These programs are getting more and more competitive, and I would encourage you to consider applying as early as possible. These are just a myriad of all the potential companies that you could gain exposure to while working with UNC. So while we certainly have industry sponsors, you may be involved in clinical trials with a variety of companies. And some of those may simply be NIH funded as well. We certainly like to play hard. We like to work hard, but we also like to relax and play hard. And you can see we have a variety of pictures here at various conferences and meetings here in our home area, certainly presenting, but also trying to take a break and unwind with friends and our pharmacy fellowship family. So I think that's an important aspect. I tell the fellows as much as they can to socialize professionally and personally, and I think that's a great opportunity to share what they're learning about the fellowship experience and to learn from one another. So we're going to take just a moment to transition the room for the Q&A, and it's great because we have like almost half the session left to kind of just address your specific questions. So I'm going to ask the fellows to come back up here, and we're just going to transition the screen so you can see all their smiling faces. And then we have someone who's kind of looking at the question portal. I know we've already gotten a couple of questions. And I'm going to address one of the questions that's come up. We had the opportunity to already address the question about the move, but one question that was asked was about residency, and that the academic fellow mentioned completing a residency. So I will say the majority of our industry-sponsored fellows do not complete residency training. I won't say that's unheard of, and it certainly doesn't hurt, but it is most definitely not required. But our academic fellows should have some residency training at a minimum of a PGY1, and many of them actually do have gone on and completed a PGY2, for example, in oncology before they come and focus on their oncology academic fellowship. You know, whatever the therapeutic area is, that's probably where they would have done their PGY2 training, but that is not mandatory either, the second year of residency training. So again, for industry-sponsored fellowship, it's not unheard of that someone's completed residency and applied to our program, but I would say it is very rare, and it certainly doesn't hurt your chances. That additional growth year, you know, I think is well respected, but again, that's a patient care focus, and that's probably not the direction you're going with your career if you're completing the industry-sponsored fellowship. Do we want to? I'm looking to our question portal person to see. Here we go.
Okay, so it looks like the two first questions are for the medical affairs fellowship. The first question is, if there's no pertinent, and there's just a comma there, but I believe it's therapeutic area, what other work or activities would you be assigned?
So for the first year, you'll get to choose a preceptor. You'll kind of rank your preceptors based on your interviews, or if you know them, or if someone kind of recommends to you. And they'll each have like a therapeutic area that they do focus on. So for instance, I'm working with Dr. Rogers and with Dr. DuPuis. Their therapeutic area focus is transplant and heart failure. So that's kind of like the projects I'm working on right now at UNC. But at GSK, my therapeutic area of focus right now at this point is rare diseases. So I am working on a project for certain rare diseases that require gene therapy and things like that. Is there another question?
For medical affairs, does your involvement within a field team as similar to that of an MSL? How can you differentiate each position, medical affairs versus MSL? So it's more of a department-related question.
Okay, so MSL is not like separate from medical affairs. It falls under medical affairs. So as I mentioned briefly before, medical affairs is a huge umbrella. There's many different components and many different aspects that make up medical affairs. Field medical is one of those, and specifically MSLs fall under that field medical. Their role is to kind of go out onto the field and establish relationships with key opinion leaders, healthcare professionals, payers, and other health medical related consumers. And as far as differentiating with them, as far as this fellowship goes, I think you'll have the opportunity to go out onto the field, and second year when you're actually with the company, you kind of touch, I guess you kind of get your hand in all different areas of medicals, and MSL is certainly field medical is certainly a role that you will be able to experience as well.
Okay, so this next question is for regulatory affairs. In the beginning, learning about European and Canadian regulations was mentioned. How is that conducted? Is it done during the first year?
All right, Right, so as part of the first 6 months, you do take part in the U.S. workshop. It's actually a workshop that's offered through Duke. So you actually go to Duke and you take this workshop where they have different regulatory affairs professionals from different companies come in and discuss topics that are relevant to U.S. regulations. And that's what prepares you for that RAC exam that I had mentioned. And the RAC exam is specific for U.S. regulations. And then in the winter or spring, they have a separate workshop that focuses on EU regulations. So at that point, you probably will have moved up to Pennsylvania. But the entire workshop can be done online. They record everything. So you won't be able to, most likely you won't be able to actually attend that workshop, but you can register and then listen to the recordings online. So you're still able to get that experience. This may change. The last time I heard from Duke, they had done away with their Canadian regulations, but it's possible that they might be starting that up. I don't know if they just took a year off. So right now, as far as I know, the workshops are offered. It's US, which takes place in the summer and fall, and then European regulations, which is winter and spring. So I'll be taking that this winter and spring coming up.
Yeah, and Dr. Dustman, can you mention you and Dr. Patel are the other Reg Affairs Fellow? We're looking into this additional IND training that they have. Can you mention that as well?
Yeah, Duke also has another class. It's General Regulatory Affairs, so it's kind of an introduction to regulatory affairs with a focus on INDs, or investigational new drugs. So that's the submission that you have to send to the regulatory authorities, specifically the FDA, it has to be sent in prior to studying the drug in humans. So before you can study the drug in humans, you have to submit your IND and have it approved. So we're currently taking a class that focuses on IND submissions and general regulatory affairs as well. So there's a lot of coursework that you can take to prepare you for a career in regulatory.
Okay, so this next question seems appropriate for Dr. Rogers. Has UNC ever recruited a fellow who did not interview at PPS or attend mid-year?
The answer is yes. I would say that is probably not the norm, and I guess PPS has just become such a large venue to hit so many people at one time. We recognize, though, that not everybody can make it to that meeting for a variety of reasons, and so certainly we've had some standout candidates kind of somehow emerge, despite not making to that meeting. But I would, yeah, and actually, Dr. Dupuy, the director, has slipped in the back door tonight to be with us, even though he's not supposed to be here until Thursday night. He's such a dedicated director and mentor. Either that or he just didn't trust us flying solo tonight. But he reminded me that we have actually, and actually Michael Wang, one of our other PK fellows, is a good example of someone who we Skyped with during his interview process. He was not able to attend the meeting, and so after the meeting, we were able to Skype with him, and we were very impressed with him during the interview, and then brought him on site. So, very good question.
Mm-hmm. And the next question seems appropriate for you as well. What are you looking for in a competitive fellowship candidate? Is there a heavy emphasis for research experience?
Yeah, I think it's important. Certainly not hands-on experience, because I think that's challenging to gain as a student. But I think it's important as a student to really investigate the career path that you're taking. I think there's a lot of ways that young individuals can do that. Depending on your institution, though, we recognize that you may have limitations. If you don't have a RTP, a Research Triangle Park, in your backyard, it may be a little more challenging to find, for example, summer internships and get exposed to that. I think some mechanisms include course electives that focus on drug development, study design, or research methodology, or if you are interested in specifically in pharmacokinetics, taking, for example, an advanced PK course or additional training in that area. I do think summertime is a good time to explore career, either through internships or shadowing people if you can get access to them. depending on your geography and travel opportunities. And then finally, I would say working with faculty to gain that exposure, so you can do independent research even if you're not in a structured research program, scholars program, or honors program. And those are just a variety of examples of things you can do to start to really answer the question of, is this a career I really want to commit to? And I think that's what's most important, is that soul-searching process. So I will say, only because the question, I think I looked over your shoulder, Dr. Patel, and saw one question somewhat related about, do students in the coursework, do professional pharmacy students take classes? And I would say that's really variable. For example, our advanced PK class, I wouldn't expect any of our pharmacy students to be able to take that. They just don't meet the prereqs for that course. In contrast, usually in our drug development class, we will have like maybe 2 or 3 professional students taking the class, and those are the students that the fellows oftentimes just happen to be mentoring, because they're students who are taking the class because they think they might want a career in industry. And so we actually encourage them to take the class, but usually it's just a few students. The one exception I would say is one of the regulatory affairs courses that is actually offered in RTP. And I don't know if Dr. Dustman maybe wants to mention that course and what that course is all about, but actually quite a few students take it. And in fact, if anything, her and Dr. Patel are probably the minority as fellows.
Yeah, with that course, as far as I know, I think it's almost all primarily UNC students, and I think as far as I know, we're the only 2 fellows. But it's focused on drug development. It's taught primarily by employees of Cato Research, which is a CRO. So you learn a lot about the drug development process, and they really. I had taken a drug development elective in pharmacy school. But this class is a little bit more detailed. It goes into kind of the nitty-gritty details of drug development. And like I had mentioned in regulatory affairs, you do work very closely with drug development. It's really important that you understand the details of drug development. So I think that that's a really good course for regulatory affairs professionals, but also drug development in general.
Yeah. And that course is actually in the Research Triangle Park. So Dr. Dustman not only drives to Duke for the Duke Clinical Research RAC, or Regulatory Affairs Certificate Program, but then she also goes to RTP. And one thing that actually I don't think was explicitly stated, I know that that our Health Outcomes Fellow, Tyler, mentioned he probably spends, like he said, about 30% of his time in the first year out at the company, and then certainly a lot more time in the second year. Dr. Dustman and the Regulatory Affairs Fellows probably spend a similar amount of time at GSK in their first year. I would say about 30%. I'm looking for Dr. Dustman to give me the nod and see if that percentage is about right. Maybe more like 40%, 35 or 40%. Our other fellows, for the most part, could be exposed about 10% of the time in the first year, and we encourage them to reach out to their corporate sponsors and start getting engaged in a project immediately in the first year, but usually it's only about 10% of the time. Let me know if I missed any exceptions. I think I got them all.
Next question is for regulatory affairs. How often do fellows have the opportunity to partake in aiding with submissions in other countries outside of the U.S.'s FDA?
The exact projects that you work on really are geared towards what you're interested in. So it is a Global Regulatory Affairs Fellowship, so there is definitely a focus on global submissions. So far, I'm the first year fellow, so I've only been here since July. I have not worked specifically on submissions outside of the U.S., but we do discuss them a lot with my preceptors. I know that I have worked on a few briefing documents to prepare for meetings with the EMA in Europe, and I know Australia is also kind of a big target for drug development as well, and getting drugs approved there. So there's definitely the opportunity, and if that's something that you're really interested in, it's something that GSK can definitely accommodate. But generally, what the progression is, they want you to become familiar with the FDA in the U.S. because that's one of the biggest markets in the world. And then usually they kind of progress you on to the EU because that's kind of the second biggest market. And then after that, it's kind of the rest of the world. You might work with Australia is a big big drug development, you really want to get your drug approved there, in Canada, South America. I've talked to a few people, and early next year I plan to be working on South American submissions. So it really does depend on what's going on with the company, but there's absolutely the opportunity for it.
So this next question applies to the industry fellows, and I believe it'd be the best way to answer this one is for each of the fellows to speak to their respective companies. The question is, what is the retention rate of fellows with their sponsorship companies?
So this is the first year that GSK is actually having a medical affairs fellow, so I can't say for sure. But it really depends on availability and if they have projects going on at the time that they need help within medical affairs. But I would assume that they do, or they would get retained with the same company, mainly because they recruited medical affairs fellows for a reason. They probably have a need in that department at this point in time. And as I mentioned, it really depends on availability. It might be a little different for other fellowships, and I'll let Stephen kind of mention about that.
So this is the first year that New Ventra has offered a PKPD fellowship. So again, I can't, similar to Dr. Paca, I can't really say. I think a lot of it also, like he mentioned, depends on availability, but also you need to put forth some effort to sort of show interest if that's what you want. So during that first year, as has been mentioned by several people, make sure that you're engaged with your company as much as you can be, getting as much experience as possible, and I think that really shows your interest in them and probably increases your chances, I would say. So.
Yeah, similar to what Dr. Paca was saying, most companies have a fellowship program for a reason. They want to bring on talent, and they don't want to spend 2 years of time and resources training you to have you go to a different company. So while not every fellow will be retained, I will say that most companies make an effort to keep you on. With GSK, this is the 3rd year. I'm now like the 3rd group to go through the regulatory affairs with GSK. So the first 2 fellows just graduated from the program this past summer, and both of them were retained. So it's definitely not guaranteed, but I would say that most companies do want to try to retain the fellows that they've trained.
And I would echo everything that's already been said, essentially. I know that over the past 5 years, United Therapeutics has kept a good majority of the fellows that they had. But again, it depends on how many positions are available at the company, as well as what your interests are, if you're interested in staying, or if you would rather branch out, or potentially want to go back home to where you live prior to the fellowship.
So. Tyler?
I would say it's about almost 100%, I guess, for people that have wanted to stay, because obviously, if you want to go somewhere else, you can do that. The person that was the first-year fellow last year actually ended up leaving the fellowship to take on a position in the same department, so I work with that person every day that I'm at GSK. And also, but whenever these programs are also like meant to train you and to become a person that's going to be working in industry, so I'd say all the people that have finished the program have had offers to go other places, which I feel like speaks to the quality of the program and training you. So I don't think the focus should be on retention rate for, I think, this person's question, but it should be about the value you're getting from this training program, and if you want to stay and you're valuable enough to stay for this for the companies, you're probably gonna get an offer if there's one available.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. So the intent for sure of the industry sponsor is to find the best and brightest talent, and I think their hope is that they're grooming their next coworker, partner, leader in pharmaceutical industry, and I think that they recognize and have a altruistic approach to it, that not every fellow is for personal reasons or whatever reasons are going to want to stay. They may want to move somewhere else in the country to be closer to family and whatnot, or have other reasons to move, but certainly their intent and their hope is that these individuals very well may want to stay on, but even if they don't, they've developed a really great individual who will gain some prominence in pharmaceutical industry, and it's a small world and you never know when you're going to meet up again, and I think that's what their hope is. But as Tyler suggested, the intent of the fellowship is that you come in, that you are very well trained. It's a pretty rigorous training program. You're exposed to a lot. You learn a lot. It's a very steep learning curve, and so you can perform at an extremely high level, not just as soon as you get hired, but even very early in the fellowship, leading group meetings, on a conference call with, someone in Europe, or another team in Europe, leading the discussion about trial endpoints for a study that you're designing. So I think that could happen, very, very early, even in your first year of your fellowship, definitely in your second year, but you could be leading, I've seen fellows finish and be leading teams for new compounds, potentially coming to market as soon as they're out of the fellowship in that very first month. So I think the training, the individuals, when they complete the training, are very well suited to perform at a very high level in any company or any venue they go to. And I would include the FDA. So occasionally fellows opt to obtain work even outside of industry in groups such as the NIH or the FDA. So very good question. I think we probably have time for maybe one or two more questions.
Yeah, and one of the questions was, is there a direct email address where we can send other questions to from this webinar? And you did have a slide with contact information from.
Yeah, so certainly we have contact information for each of the fellows here if you want to follow up with them about information that they shared. The list here does include fellows that are presenting tonight as well as those presenting on Thursday night. As I mentioned earlier, the graduate program will be the focus tomorrow night, and I'm sure they'll share contact information for our graduate students. But there was an email a couple of slides back. And if you go to the Pharmacy DPET Fellowships website, you will find an email address where you can, reach either Dr. Dupuy or myself, or both of us collectively through that process to ask additional questions.
Mm-hmm. And there's one more question pertaining to the academic fellowships. Would you consider an application from a PhD and a PhD PharmD without a residency for the academic fellowships?
Yeah, I can't speak, so I would say that each of the academic fellowship mentors, we have a lot of common philosophies and expectations and goals for the fellows, but we are a little unique and individual, so I think that would vary a little bit from individual preceptor to preceptor, so I can't speak for the oncology person or the faculty that oversees HIV and infectious disease. But I think that sounds like someone who's very well trained and something that I would be naive not to entertain. So for sure, very good question.
Time for one more question? Or?
Yeah, maybe one more.
Okay, this one's a medical affairs one. How much exposure do you have with external experts?
So I'm actually a first-year fellow. Right now, not a lot, but I would assume next year I'll have plenty. To kind of give you an example, I've only been here for 3 months. So my first year is supposed to be at UNC, but as I mentioned before, I'm already working on projects related to GSK, and I've already presented once to the medical matrix team consisting of physicians and all other disciplines in healthcare professions. And I'm also going to be presenting for a medical commercial strategy team next month. So I do have a bunch of mixed different areas of, jobs that I do present to. For instance, the commercial teams mostly consist of probably MBAs. So it is a different kind of group that you present to each time. As far as physicians go, you'll mostly present to like within company internal stakeholders. When you go out onto the field, like more second year, that's when you really present to external experts in the specific therapeutic area.
Yeah. And I would say that I think when Pranay answered that question, he was focusing a little more on the industry aspect, and he's kind of underselling what he's already accomplished in the short time he's been here. So he's been very busy and has already gained hands-on experience with 3 clinical trials, one of which is an industry-sponsored trial through which he's interacted and worked with our contracts office, our collaborators over at the School of Medicine, as well as the funding source through the NIH and the University of Wisconsin. He has also touched an investigator-initiated study and been very involved with the design of that study, IRB approval of both those studies, as well as, again, working with the physician and medical team collaborators on that study. And then finally, he's involved in a study through our collaboration with NIEHS, which is our National Institute of Environmental Health and Safety. So he's, in this very short period of time, already been exposed to 3 teams of individuals and really, really accomplished a lot to get these projects off the ground and running. And so he should be commended for that. I know he's really excited about getting more exposure to the industry side of colleagues, but I think he's definitely already started to more than accomplish what the company, what GSK wanted him to, as far as learning how to make these relationships and understanding the feasibility of the studies and how this research gets conducted from the ground level. So.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers.
Yeah. And I don't even get to work with him but like a third of the time, so anyway. So, I want to thank everybody for taking time tonight, especially our fellows, for their expertise and talking about their experience. It was very gracious of them to give up their time. And for anybody who's on the other end of the line still with us at this late hour, at least for us on the East Coast, we look forward to potentially hearing from you via email or seeing you at mid-year in Las Vegas. And good luck with your last-minute preparations, getting ready for that meeting or submitting your applications. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.
Just one quick comment. We're going to be sending out a survey for the webinar, so if you can please just fill that out for us, it'll be great. It'll kind of give us feedback on how we did and what we can improve on for the following years. So yeah, just last quick comment. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Paca. And that survey will not go out until Friday morning after all of the webinars are done, not late Thursday night, but probably early Friday morning. So thank you if you could complete that. That would help us a lot. Have a good night.